So should I pay a collection agency or should I pay the original creditor? In this episode, we'll discuss charge-offs and how collections end up on a person's credit report. We'll discover how to find out if a collection actually exists on a person's credit report. And then we'll discuss if paying the original creditor, the collection agency, or paying off the collection at all makes any sense. Let's begin our conversation with the talk of how you get to a collection. Initially, let's say that you have a creditor, credit card as an example, and you're going to be late on that credit card. A lot of people think that if you go one day over your due date, that's actually considered late. While that's true, it doesn't necessarily dink your credit, okay? So one day late after your due date is going to cause problems with the creditor. Obviously, you're going to get late fees, and you're going to get some phone calls, and you're going to get some emails that you're late, but it doesn't necessarily trigger late pay on your credit report until you get to 30 days. So that's something really important to remember. If you're struggling to make your bills on time, you can actually go 29 days late after your due date and it actually not be a strike on your credit profile. Remember, our first strike on our credit profile is going to be at 30 days. Okay, now once you're 30 days late, you're going to get a derogatory on your credit profile for that account. It's going to show that you're 30 days late. And then it progressively gets worse from there. So if you're 60 days late, you get a 60-day late pay. If you get 90 days late, you're at that 3-month mark, that's actually going to be a major derogatory. And the reason that's going to be a major derogatory is because the credit scoring algorithm is actually designed to be telling as to the ability of a consumer to pay back money in the next 24 months and not be 90 days late. So when you hit that 90-day trigger, it's going to be a big dip in credit score. After 90 days, it goes 120 days, then 150, and then at 6 months is typically when you're going to see what's called a charge-off. And a lot of people think that a charge-off means that they don't necessarily owe the money for that account any longer. And that's not so, right? A charge-off is simply accounting terminology that's saying the creditor is writing that debt off on their bad debt expense, and it means that it's uncollectible at the moment. So to be clear, a charge-off does not mean that the money has been charged off and you no longer owe the money. It's just an accounting terminology for the creditor. The money is still very much owed. So now that there's a charge-off that's going to be on our credit profile, it can evolve in several different ways. The first way that a charge-off can evolve is that the original creditor is actually trying to collect on that, right? That's not necessarily gone into collection status yet. I mean, technically it has gone into collection status, but it's still with the original creditor. So yes, you might be getting phone calls from them to try to pay on that. You might be getting emails and all kinds of different types of collection efforts, but technically it's still in charge-off status. The number 2 way that a charge-off can evolve is it can be outsourced. And what that means is that the original creditor still owns the debt. However, they've outsourced their collection efforts, usually to an attorney. So if you get a call from an attorney saying that they're Capital One as an example, doesn't necessarily mean that Capital One sold that debt to the attorney. It just means that they've upped their level of collection efforts, and now they're going to try to collect in a different way. And usually when they outsource, that outsourced company gets a piece of whatever they can collect on that debt. The third way that a charge-off evolves is it goes to a third-party collection agency. Okay, and typically what this means is it means that the third-party collection agency has purchased that debt. So let's go back to the credit card. Let's say that it's Capital One. We go 6 months of not being paid. The account gets charged off. Let's say it's $1,000 that we owed. With fees and late payments and all that, let's say it's $1,250. It gets pushed over to a collection agency. Let's say ABC Collection Agency purchases that debt. That means that Capital One no longer owns the debt. Okay, so now that you know how a debt evolves from going from late pay into charge-off status and kind of the 3 different ways that it can evolve into a collection and ultimately to a third-party collection, what do you do if you know in your budget that you're going to be late on a certain payment? A lot of people, and I can tell you this because most of my clients that come to me, what ends up happening is they actually just kind of bury their head in the sand. It's very embarrassing for people not to be able to pay their bills. And instead of addressing it, taking the bull by the horn and really doing something about it, what a lot of people do, and I honestly don't blame them, is that they just avoid the situation altogether. It's very difficult to pick up a phone call when you don't have money to pay. But I think that might not always be the best kind of process moving forward. It's in my opinion the best way to deal with defaulted bills is to actually stay in contact with the creditor. They're going to pursue you. You're not going to be able to get out of their way. It's going to happen. So the best thing to do is to pick up your phone and say, hey, listen, creditor, hey, listen, Capital One, I am having trouble making my minimum payments this month, and this is the reason why, and this is the day that I'm going to have partial payment, full payment to you to make good on that debt, right? So make payment arrangements, look at your budget, and try to sort out this situation as it begins to go bad. And I know that can be very difficult, especially if you've wrecked your car, or you've lost your job, or COVID hits, all of those things. It's very difficult to try to jump into that situation and really make some commitments that you may not be able to make in the future. But it's better to talk to your creditors than not talk to your creditors. How do we find out if that collection is actually going to be on your credit profile? So remember, just because you're having trouble paying, or just because you haven't paid something, doesn't mean that it's an actual collection on your credit profile. As we've discovered, it could just be in charge-off status. It could be that the original creditor is still trying to collect on it, but it hasn't hit as a brand new collection on your credit profile. Or it could be a situation to where it hasn't made its way to collection to begin with. And there are some situations where that occurs. Collections don't always occur when there's an original creditor involved. Some cases, for medical bills that end up being problematic for us to pay, we didn't actually ask to be extended credit for that. It's just a bill that went unpaid. Sometimes those can hit your credit in 6 months. Sometimes they can hit your credit in 3 months, which, by the way, is illegal. It's supposed to wait at least 6 months. In fact, the law just changed to where they have to wait a year. Sometimes it's a year later, sometimes it's 2 years later before those collections hit your credit profile. The best way to determine if you have collections on your credit profile is obviously to pull a fresh credit report, right? So we can look on our credit profile and determine what accounts actually went to collection status, what accounts are actually in charge-off status, and make those evaluations. You can go to several different sources and get free credit reports from Experian, TransUnion, Equifax, annualcreditreport.com. Another good source to find what's going on in your credit is going to be credit monitoring. There's lots of good credit monitoring systems out there. And what they're going to do is they're going to actually be able to pull in a tri-merge report. If it's a paid credit monitoring service, you're going to be able to pull a fresh report every month. You're going to get automatic triggers that tell you when things have changed, so you can monitor everything that's on your credit. Okay, now before we get into the final pieces of collections, please like this video and subscribe to my channel. I'll be working hard to bring you a video every single week over home lending, credit, and other relevant personal finance topics. Okay, so now you found out that you definitely have a collection on your credit profile. What is the first step? And it's not always to go and settle that debt. The first step in the process is you're going to find out what companies own that collection. And in many cases, you're not going to recognize the company that owns the debt because it's going to be a separate company from where the debt originated. So in other words, you're not going to know who that company is. Now, the Fair Credit Reporting Act says anything that's not 100% accurate or doesn't appear to be valid can be challenged. So your first step, since you're not going to know what company this is on your credit profile, is going to be to dispute that item. I would reach out to the original creditor, the collection agency, and all 3 credit bureaus and absolutely tell them that you don't recognize what this debt is. And the reason that's important is because, first of all, it's true. You don't know who it is. Second of all, we want to make sure that that's valid if we're going to consider settling it. Okay, now once you've gone and you've disputed the items for your very legitimate reasons, and they come back that indeed they are verified, indeed the debt is legitimate, indeed they can trace it back to the original creditor, and you're satisfied that the debt is real debt, then you're going to consider settling the debt. In almost all cases, it is going to make sense to settle debt. Now, the original topic that we're talking about is how do I settle debt? Where do I settle debt? Do I go through the original creditor? Do I go through the collection agency? How do I go about doing that? In almost all cases, if you've made the determination that you're going to settle the debt, and usually it is a good idea for a variety of reasons, I'll film another episode that'll talk about the certain situations where it doesn't make sense to settle debt. You almost always want to go through the original creditor. As an example, let's say that you moved out of your apartment complex and you have an old utility bill, like perhaps a cable bill, and it's gone to collection status. If you have the ability to go to the original cable company and settle that debt, that's going to serve you extremely well. And here's the reason why. Because you've got a third-party collection on your credit profile that's saying that you owe them money, right? It's an independent third party. But you went to the original creditor and you've paid them that money. There's a real good argument that what's this third-party collection agency doing trying to collect from you when you've already paid the original creditor? In the States, we have this law called double jeopardy. You're not allowed to charge people twice for the same item. So that's a really good way to circumvent the collection agency. And then once the debt's settled with the original creditor, you can go back to the collection agency and dispute that item and say, the balance is incorrect. I've already paid the original creditor. This debt's invalid. Please delete from my credit profile. And I'll tell you what, that works a vast majority of the time when it comes to getting collections removed after they've been settled. Now, let's say that you went to the original creditor, you've paid off the debt, you've disputed the item with the collection agency, the bureaus, and the collection agency is being hard-nosed, and they're not removing it from your credit profile. They say, I don't care that you paid the original creditor. They outsourced this work to us. We technically owe the debt. I don't care that they collected on it. We're not removing it from your credit profile. Your very next step is going to be to bring it into regulator territory. So if you go to the CFPB, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, you can actually submit a complaint on that collection agency. And your argument is this, is that I paid it with the original creditor. On the credit report, it's showing that there's still a balance for this account. Since I paid the original creditor, I'd like for this to reflect correctly on my credit profile. Please delete this collection. And I know that wording's a little bit funny, but most of the time, the collection agency, because you got regulators involved, will give you a courtesy deletion. Again, it's fairly rare that you have to take it that far, but if you do have to take it that far, this is a good tactic to follow. If you have credit challenges or need help with your credit, then I have a free gift for you. My team will complete a complimentary credit analysis and then develop a plan for you to help you meet your financial goals. The only requirement is you'll have to buy a tri-merge report with a system that we use called Smart Credit.